Welcome to the eXtremeRate YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to walk you through the installation of the Victor Remap Kit on the Xbox Series S controller. Inside the box of the Victor Remap Kit, you will find all the components including the bottom shell, 2 rails, and the back button kits, FPC, PCBA, tester board, and ribbon, tools kit including spudger, different screws, and screwdrivers. Now let's get started. First we need to remove the battery cover. Then use the spudger to remove both rails from the top end. To remove the cover, we need to insert the spudger into the gap and pry it a bit to create a gap in the side. Then insert the spudger into the side rail and pry it up. With some force, the cover would pop out easily. Now let's do the same to the other side. Insert the spudger to create the gap and pry the gap to get the cover off. Then we need to unlock the 5 screws that secure the bottom cover. You can see there are 2 screws on the left, 2 on the right, and 1 in the middle. Now is the top on the left. Use the screwdriver to unlock those screws counterclockwise. For the middle one, you need to pierce the paper covering the screw, and then unlock the screw. Now unlock the one on the top of the right. The one on the bottom left. And the one on the bottom right. After the screws are removed, let's take out the front plate, 2 thumbsticks, and the bottom cover. Then we need to take out the metal connector plate and the battery slot. Use the spudger to lift it up from the end. The plate would pop and loose on one side. Now let's turn it to the other side to lift it all out. After getting it out, keep the connector plate and put it in place. Now let's move to the motherboard sector. Please note the circled spots on the screen, which are the connectors of the flat wires. Use the spudger to unclip the connectors of the 2 flat wires that connect to PCB. We can use a little tape to fix the wires to better organize them. Fix them onto the bumper frame would be a good choice, so the wires won't stick out and annoy you in the following installation. Now we need to deal with the rumble power cables on the motherboard. There are 8 cables in total and we need to disconnect them by solder iron. Check the cable's color orders from top to bottom. They are gray, black, red, and black. Heat the soldering iron to a temperature above 350 Celsius and below 400, and put solder on the joints of each cable. Please be careful during the soldering in case the motherboard is damaged by the heat. Then heat the joints to disconnect the cables by orders. Next, let's do the same for the other side. And put solder on the joints of each cable. The soldering would be a bit tricky. If you couldn't get it through at once, be patient and try to manage it once more. Then heat the joints to disconnect the cables by orders. Once it's done, all the cables are successfully disconnected. Now let's remove the PCBA too. Unlock the screws securing the board, one on the left and one on the right. After removing 2 screws, we need to get the board released from the controller. Lift the board with fingers from the edge, and it should pop off easily as it is. As is shown in the picture reference, the board in the inner space is PCBA1 and the outer one is PCBA2. Remove the headphone jack and put it aside. Next we need to solder the FPC1 onto the motherboard. Please check the reference to make sure you got the right kit. First we need to unlock the screws on the PCBA1. Use the screwdriver to unlock them counterclockwise. After removing the screws, let's put the FPC onto the board. Please note that the joints on the FPC and on the board should be precisely lined up. After the FPC is well placed onto the board, let's lock back the screw to secure the FPC. And in case the FPC would dislocate in the following installation process, it is necessary to use the tapes to fix the FPC on the motherboard. As you can see, one on the top and one on the bottom should be enough. Now we need to solder the FPC onto the motherboard. Before you solder the FPC, please refer to the soldering joints in the picture and make sure you solder the correct joints. Preheat the soldering iron on the TP solder joint for about 1 to 3 seconds, and then put some solder onto the joint nice and slow. Then we can use the tweezers to hold the FPC and wait for the solder to cool down. Now do the same to the next soldering point. Preheat the point, put some solder, and wait for its cool down. Now let's do the third one. Be careful and take it slowly for the rest of the soldering. After done soldering all the points on the left side, let's solder the rest points on the right side. Now all the solderings are done here. Let's go back and check if we solder all the points, in case we miss anyone. There are 12 soldering points in total. Please make sure each is soldered nice and neat. After checking that all the points are well soldered, let's move to the PCBA2. First, let's put the headphone jack back onto the PCBA board. And then let's put back the PCBA2 onto the controller. Adjust the board and line it up nice and neat to make it fit onto the controller. Then let's get ready to solder the FPC2 onto the PCBA board. Line up the soldering points and lay the FPC right on the board. And in case the FPC would dislocate in the following installation process, let's use the tapes to fix the FPC onto the board. Now the FPC is laid nice and neat, let's get ready to do the soldering. Before you solder the FPC, please refer to the soldering joints in the picture and make sure you solder the correct joints. Preheat the soldering iron on the TP solder joint for about 1 to 3 seconds, and then put some solder onto the joint nice and slow. Then we can use the tweezers to hold the FPC and wait for the solder to cool down. Then do the same to the rest of the soldering points. Be patient on every soldering and careful not to heat too long in case we damage the circuit board. Now all the solderings are done here. Let's go back and check if we solder all the points, in case we miss anyone. And then flip the extension part on the FPC1 upward. And plug the ribbon of the FPC2 into the connector. And then lock the connector flap to secure the ribbon. Now we can use the tester board in the kit to test if all the points are well soldered. Please read the instructions on how to start the test and do the self-check. First we need to use the ribbon to connect the FPC to the tester board. Plug in one end of the ribbon to the tester board flap. And the other end to the FPC connector flap. After we connect the FPC to the tester board, we need to power the controller to make it work. And then check the indicators on the tester board. If all the indicators light up on the tester board, it indicates all the joints are correctly soldered. Now let's cut off the power and remove the ribbon to disconnect the tester board. Next we need to sync the controller to the PC to check if all the buttons work properly. Sync the controller, and then open the controller test site. Press all the buttons and check if all the buttons work properly. After we confirm all the buttons are working, we can unplug the cable and move to the next part. Unclip the locking flap and peel the film on its back. And then paste the FPC1 connector part onto the FPC2. After the connector part is well placed, we can plug the ribbon into the connector flat. Next we need to solder the power cable to the motherboard. Please check the reference and solder the cables by color order in case they are soldered onto the wrong soldering point. Use the soldering iron and put some solders onto all the soldering points before we solder the cables. And then we can solder the cable back onto the motherboard. First is the gray cable. And then the black one. Next is the red one. And the black one at the end. After done soldering the cables on the left, let's solder the cables on the right side. Likewise, we need to put some solder on the soldering point first. And then solder the cable in color orders gray, black, red, and black. After all the cables are soldered to the motherboard, we can use the reference again to check if they are all correctly soldered in the corresponding place. Now we can release the two antenna cables we previously pasted on the bumper and reconnect them to the connector. Then let's lock back the two screws on the motherboard. You can either use the stock silver screws or the black screw in the kit pack. And arrange the cables and make them neatly placed. Then let's move to the next part. We need to remove the battery cover on the new bottom shell and install the battery connector plate into the slot. Line it up and make sure it is placed nice and neat. Then we need to install the back button frame. Line up the one frame to the button place and press it down to fit onto the shell. And then install the other side to the bottom shell. Press it down to fit it onto the shell. Now we can install the back buttons K3 and K4 on the right side. and back buttons K1 and K2 on the left side. Then we need to install the setting button onto the back shell. First, we need to install the transparent button holding piece. Please note the side with the notch is for the left. Press it down to the end as much as possible, and then install the setting button in the middle hole. Then let's install the button PCA onto the button holder block. First, line up the K3 and K4 PCB on the holder and make sure they fit neatly. And then lock the screw to secure the PCB onto the holder block. Please carefully lock the screw to avoid being stripped or sticking out. And then install the K1 and K2 PCB on the holder block. Line it up and make sure both parts fit neat and tight. Then fit the two holder blocks onto the back button place and secure them with the screws. Next, let's plug one end of the ribbon into the PCBA board connector and turn the side with the connector downside. And lock the screws to secure the PCBA board to the bottom shell. To better arrange the ribbon, it is allowed to fold the ribbon a bit. And then connect the other end of the ribbon to the FPC connector. After the ribbon is connected, let's put the front and bottom parts back together. Please be careful not to clip the ribbon. Line up both parts nice and neat, and fix them together. Now we need to put back 2 thumbsticks onto the controller. And then install the front plate. Then lock back all the screws in the bottom cover. Install the side rails. Last, let's put back the battery cover, and the installation of the Victor Remap Kit is all done. In the following section, we will show you how to check and test the Victor Remap Kit. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your modding journey with eXtremeRate.